It all started one morning as I stood on my porch, coffee in hand, staring at the vacant spot where my cherished tomatoes had thrived just the day before. Though it might seem dramatic, the loss felt like a parent mourning a missing child. These weren't just any tomatoes. They were my pride and solace from life's daily hustle, and far less expensive than therapy. As I absorbed the disappearance, I scanned the neighborhood with suspicion. Once peaceful suburbs, meticulously trimmed lawns, and amiable neighbors now appeared sinister. Someone had brazenly invaded my property, pilfering my precious sun-ripened tomatoes. I resolved to uncover the perpetrator. With a deep breath, I reminded myself this wasn't a complex detective story. Yet, perhaps it was merely a fluke or a ravenous squirrel with refined tastes. The thought of a raccoon indulging in a lavish tomato banquet at my expense was oddly comforting compared to the alternative, a neighbor sabotaging my beloved garden. Shaking off paranoia, I retreated indoors, deciding not to overanalyze. But my peace was short-lived. 2 days later, the theft recurred, leaving no evidence behind. My tomatoes vanished, leaving only forlorn, leafy remnants of their past glory. Determined not to succumb to tomato thieves, I embarked on a proper investigation. Equipped with my phone, camera, and a newly acquired wireless security system, I transitioned from part-time gardener to full-time detective. Karen swiftly became my primary suspect. Yes, that Karen. The infamous president of our homeowners association, renowned for her meticulous lawn examinations, passive-aggressive correspondence, and zeal for enforcing obscure rules. Karen had always shown undue interest in my garden, especially my tomatoes, even critiquing them during her routine inspections. On one occasion, she suggested symmetrical tomato cages to uphold community standards. Knowing her dislike for my laid-back gardening style, I found pleasure in ignoring her overly intricate advice. I started discreetly observing her, in search of clues, not having to wait long for suspicious behavior. The same evening, while watering my plants under the guise of innocence, I spotted Karen and her miniature poodle, Princess, sauntering past my property. Her narrowed gaze seemed fixed on my tomato stubs. Upon noticing me, her overly bright smile and exaggerated wave accompanied a disparaging remark about gardening not being everyone's forte. Her voice carried enough condescension to heighten my suspicions. I smiled politely, muttering something about bothersome raccoons, but internally suspected a more vexing creature, clad in pastel cardigans and sensible shoes. Once Karen had passed, I swiftly set up my surveillance camera amidst the foliage, feeling akin to a spy on a covert mission. I concealed the camera, adjusted the angle, and checked my phone. Ideal. If Karen or anyone returned to sabotage my garden, I'd gather irrefutable evidence. The following morning, eager to review the footage, I awoke before sunrise. Initially, nothing seemed amiss. Birds chirped innocently, leaves rustled gently, and then there she was. Karen, in gardening gloves, an oversized straw hat, and pink Crocs, approached my plants as though perusing a supermarket. My jaw dropped as she casually picked a ripe tomato, tucking it decisively into her bag, glancing around as if committing an internationally noteworthy crime. Stunned, my emotions alternated between anger, disbelief, and helpless laughter. It seemed absurd yet intensely personal. Karen, my HOA adversary, wasn't just critiquing my gardening. She was literally stealing the fruits of my labor. The audacity was astonishing. Briefly, I entertained thoughts of her organizing a neighborhood tomato salad party with stolen produce, likely seasoned with hypocrisy. But amusement quickly gave way to determination. This was no mere petty theft. It was personal. Karen had crossed a boundary, and retribution was essential. However, such payback needed to be as poignant as it was gratifying, and that's when inspiration struck rapidly as I scrolled through my phone. I stumbled upon a video with the intriguing title Carolina Reaper Pepper Challenge, and couldn't suppress the grin that crept onto my face. Watching adults break down in tears, faces flushed and dripping with sweat from the intense heat, was oddly captivating. It sparked a cunning notion in my mind to stealthily intersperse Carolina Reapers, the planet's hottest peppers, among my tomato plants. When Karen came to pilfer once again, she would face an unforgettable surprise, a form of poetic justice. My exasperation transformed into anticipation as I pictured her sinking her teeth into what she assumed was a sweet tomato, unleashing a fiery pandemonium instead. Brimming with excitement, I headed to the local gardening center, where I casually explained to a puzzled cashier my peculiar decision to plant these scorching peppers alongside my tomatoes. His questioning expression was plain, but I remained unconcerned, intent on setting my plan into motion. Within hours, I was planting the Carolina Reaper seedlings amidst the tomato plants, quietly apologizing to the peppers for the perilous mission they were about to undertake. As I surveyed my handiwork, a wave of anticipation washed over me. Karen was blissfully unaware, and truthfully, even I was uncertain of the potential fallout. Planting these fiery peppers would soon spark a situation far beyond my expectations. As time marched on, I tended to my hidden arsenal, the Carolina Reapers, with a blend of pride, anticipation, and a touch of guilt. Watching them flourish was oddly soothing, knowing their true intent was retribution. Unlike my harmless tomatoes, victims of Karen's petty pilfering, these peppers were indeed little infernos, growing more vibrant and formidable by the day, seemingly gearing up for a confrontation. The simple act of watering them felt fraught with danger, with each droplet sizzling ominously upon contact with the soil, foretelling the wrath awaiting any intruder daring to disturb them. Engaging in retaliatory gardening proved to be no simple endeavor. It wasn't long before the neighbors began noticing my sudden commitment to my gardening pursuits. Curiosity grew as my previously casual approach morphed into an intense daily routine. Neighbor Jerry spotted my renewed enthusiasm one afternoon and jovially remarked, "Going for Neighborhood Garden of the Year, are we?" I chuckled anxiously, feeling akin to a bank robber unexpectedly exposed. Jerry didn't need to know about my pepper scheme, but his light-hearted ribbing left me briefly paranoid, pondering who else might have sensed the abrupt change. The real challenge arrived when Karen herself made an unannounced appearance. Just as I meticulously camouflaged the peppers under leaves, her voice interrupted the tranquility of the late afternoon air. "Interesting choice of fertilizer," she announced, her gaze skeptically peering over the fence, her poodle princess reflecting a similarly judgmental stance. Turning slowly, a forced smile spread across my face, my heart pounding as if I'd been nabbed in the act of an illicit deed. "Just experimenting a bit," I replied nonchalantly, desperate to keep my voice steady amidst the chaotic world beneath the surface. Karen edged closer, poised to deliver one of her notorious unsolicited garden critiques. "Well, just remember," she cautioned, finger raised dramatically as if imparting ancient gardening lore, "community guidelines clearly state all plants must be aesthetically pleasing and non-hazardous." Her words lingered heavily between us. "Wouldn't want to accidentally poison anyone now, would we?" she added, eyebrow arched knowingly, as if she'd suddenly uncovered my clandestine plot through some newfound psychic ability. I laughed uneasily, the sound betraying far more than I intended, assuring her hurriedly, "Of course not, Karen," while internally hoping she'd depart before noticing my quivering hands and guilty expression. After a tense scrutiny of my garden, she finally withdrew, leaving behind only the faint fragrance of lavender and a tinge of passive aggression. Following Karen's nerve-jangling visit, I resolved it was time to expedite my plans. I began scrutinizing the pepper's growth obsessively, counting each new leaf and pod. When the reapers finally matured, vibrant red and packed with lethal heat, my excitement surged. Carefully, I placed the most potent peppers beside the tomatoes, positioning them strategically to serve as irresistible bait. Under the sun's rays, they glistened innocently yet held a dangerous allure. The stage was set, but catching Karen demanded. Beyond my pepper plants, my upgraded security camera, equipped with motion-sensitive alerts sent straight to my phone, became my nightly companion in surveillance. Each night felt like a stakeout, my nerves stretched thin as I watched live footage from my cozy living room. Every rustling leaf or flash of movement quickened my pulse, but night after night passed uneventfully. Impatient and frustrated, I began to wonder if Karen had uncovered my plan or simply lost interest. Then, one evening, just as fatigue threatened to overcome me, my phone vibrated violently with an alert. I nearly spilled my coffee in surprise, grasping the device with clammy hands and opening the camera app with breathless anticipation. The blurry monochrome footage revealed a shadowy figure stealthily entering through my garden gate. Adrenaline surged. This was it. Yet, as the figure drew nearer, something seemed off. The person was smaller, clearly younger, not Karen's distinctive silhouette. Puzzled, I watched as the intruder, a local teenager, nabbed a tomato and took a bite, only to grimace and drop it, frantically fanning their mouth in agony. Part of me felt guilty witnessing their dash toward the garden hose in search of relief, yet another part, the petty side, felt an odd satisfaction seeing my peppers work their intended magic, even if the thief wasn't my true target. Catching the wrong culprit was no triumph, though. Karen remained untouched, likely scheming another raid, unaware of the fiery fate narrowly avoided by the teenage trespasser. Realizing the popularity of garden theft in our neighborhood was underestimated, I decided a new approach was essential before my garden turned into the local snack spot. Another unexpected turn occurred when Karen confronted me, this time with grievances about my gardening approach directly quoted from the HOA handbook, accusing me of overcrowding plants and creating visual chaos. Her irritation seemed personal, as though my garden's layout had affronted her sensibilities. "Your garden's a mess," she declared dramatically. "How can anyone appreciate neighborhood harmony amid such disorder?" Her exaggerated performance almost made me chuckle, yet her criticism sparked inspiration. If Karen couldn't resist griping, perhaps she wouldn't resist tidying my untidy garden herself. I smiled, nodding calmly, feigning agreement while secretly crafting a plan. Unbeknownst to her, she revealed her weakness, her insatiable need to control. All I needed was to leave things slightly chaotic, luring her into action. As Karen walked away, sure of victory in our latest duel, I found renewed determination. My peppers weren't just a fence. They symbolized quiet rebellion against her relentless tyranny. Each day, my tomatoes and peppers edged closer to becoming the perfect lure, just messy enough to draw her scrutiny, yet innocuous-looking enough to hide the fiery truth. That evening, I rearranged the peppers meticulously, creating a chaotic yet enticing spectacle. Each pepper gleamed with a hidden promise of heat. I whispered confidently to the evening breeze, challenging Karen, "Come and get them." Little did I know how my small act of defiance would ignite a neighborhood-wide spectacle of spice and amusing disorder. Harvest day arrived, brimming with excitement and tension, infusing my morning coffee with an adrenaline rush. With the sun barely risen, I stepped outside, the air cool and the garden shimmering under dewdrops. My Carolina Reaper stood out like tiny crimson warnings amidst the tomatoes, plump, vibrantly ripe, and deceptively inviting, akin to brightly colored grenades primed to explode. My heart raced at the thought of Karen's imminent spicy mishap, and I chuckled at the scenario's absurdity. Who would have guessed suburban gardening could morph into a covert revenge thriller? Inspecting each pepper, I envisaged Karen's reaction upon her next tomato heist igniting into a fiery mishap. Would she scream, flee down the street hysterically, perhaps even convene an emergency HOA meeting? Each scenario seemed simultaneously amusing and fitting. However, beneath my bravado, a flicker of guilt surfaced. Was I going too far? I quickly brushed aside the thought. After all, Karen had repeatedly pilfered from my garden. This was poetic justice, a spicy version even. With my trap set, I retreated indoors, maintaining my vigil, eyes glued to my phone screen, patiently observing my live security feed across long, uneventful hours. A recent event left me in a state of restless frustration, as doubts began to seep in once more. Had Karen somehow caught wind of my plan, and was she intentionally steering clear of the carefully laid trap I had set? Just as my impatience reached its zenith, I noticed her unmistakable figure appearing through the garden gate. My heart raced and my grip tightened on my phone as I observed her every movement. Karen advanced with exaggerated caution, frequently casting nervous glances toward my house. Her attire was quite amusing. She resembled a cartoonish burglar, complete with oversized sunglasses and gardening gloves dramatically pulled up over her elbows. She crept towards my tomato plants with an absurd stealth, as though anticipating someone to jump from the shrubs and exclaim, "Gotcha!" Yet there I was, discreetly concealed behind my curtains, phone in hand, capturing each comical, incriminating moment with a misguided confidence, Karen reached into the foliage, picking a particularly bright pepper she mistakenly assumed was a tomato due to dim twilight. I barely breathed as she slowly raised it, examining it briefly before sinking her teeth into it, her smug expression suggesting triumph at another successful pilfer. The reaction was immediate and highly theatrical. Her eyes widened dramatically, and she froze mid-bite, mouth slowly gaping in shock. I leaned closer to the screen, utterly mesmerized as Karen's confident manner disappeared, replaced by wide-eyed panic, unfolding into utter chaos. Karen emitted a shriek loud enough to awaken half the neighborhood, frantically fanning her mouth with exaggerated desperation. She blundered blindly, clawing at the garden hose, managing only to spray water wildly over her face and eyes. Her screams intensified, hilariously mingling with the frantic spraying sounds of water ending up everywhere but her mouth. In a moment of pure comedic justice, her oversized gardening hat toppled into the muddy flower bed as she flailed dramatically, losing all semblance of composure. Unable to contain myself, I erupted into laughter behind my window, feeling a mixture of sympathy and triumphant satisfaction. This spectacle was far more entertaining than I could have ever anticipated. Karen staggered blindly towards the street, pepper juice and tears streaming down her flushed cheeks, muttering incoherently about poisoned tomatoes. Her miniature crime spree concluded in a spectacular yet tragic manner when she collided directly into Mr. Johnson, the elderly neighbor who had innocently ventured outside to investigate the commotion. In her pepper-induced frenzy, Karen snatched Mr. Johnson's freshly delivered newspaper, using it to fan her burning tongue like a fire extinguisher, which only seemed to exacerbate her plight. Mr. Johnson looked on helplessly, utterly bewildered by the bizarre scene unfolding in a serene street. Moments later, Karen bolted down the pavement, eyes and mouth ablaze with regret, dramatically lamenting betrayal, sabotage, and threats of legal action. By the time Karen vanished from my sight, I was overtaken by uncontrollable laughter, genuinely amazed by the comedic spectacle that had unfolded. Yet beneath my gleeful satisfaction, a feeling of unease brewed. I realized Karen would not accept this embarrassment lying down. She would likely retaliate with all the petty ferocity of her homeowners association HOA authority. Despite being aware of the inevitable consequences, I couldn't deny the sheer delight of witnessing justice delivered in such a spicy manner. That evening, I replayed the hilarious footage repeatedly, marveling at Karen's dramatic display and enjoying every comedic nuance. I contemplated anonymously sharing it online, imagining the potential viral fame for Karen, but ultimately dismissed the idea, at least for now. Revenge tasted sweet, but public humiliation might escalate the situation too drastically, or perhaps not sufficiently. I wasn't entirely sure. However, as I lay in bed, unsuccessfully stifling fits of laughter, my phone buzzed unexpectedly with notification. An email from the HOA appeared, ominously labeled as urgent regarding an incident. My humor swiftly transformed to dread as I opened the email. It contained a formal notice evidently dictated by Karen, accusing me of maintaining dangerous gardening practices and threatening legal action unless immediate steps were undertaken to restore community safety standards. I laughed bitterly at the irony. Karen was wielding HOA rules against me after stealing my tomatoes. This new twist complicated matters significantly. It was no longer a mere trivial neighborhood squabble. It was morphing into an absurd legal drama. Karen, ever persistent, refused to accept defeat, escalating the conflict further. I realized my humorous revenge had inadvertently sparked a new battle, one fought not with garden tools, but with HOA regulations. Resolute on not letting Karen seize control of the narrative, I meticulously drafted a counter-response, including the video as evidence, clearly demonstrating Karen's own illicit tomato theft. Yet, I knew this was merely the beginning. Karen's pride was bruised beyond recovery, and retreat wasn't an option for her. As I sent the email, apprehension crept in. What began as a simple gardening contest had morphed into something alarmingly large and unmanageable. That night, sleep evaded me as my mind spun with what lay ahead. The once innocent quarrel over gardens had exploded into a neighborhood saga filled with humor, spice, and a quest for vengeance. One thing was certain. The days to come promised unexpected heat. The aftermath of Karen's fiery escapade spread like wildfire, faster than gossip at a school meeting. By morning, whispers and chuckles echoed through the streets, as neighbors exchanged wry smiles over coffee mugs and watering cans. Karen had inadvertently become both a legend and a cautionary tale, a mix of tragic victim and humorous antagonist. Even those who once backed her stringent residential rules chuckled at the thought of Karen dashing through sprinklers, passionately crying about toxic tomatoes. However, beneath the humor, tension simmered. Stepping outside, the neighborhood felt oddly divided. On one side, neighbors who'd silently resented Karen's domineering style offered discreet thumbs up or approving nods. On the other, disapproving looks were cast, loyalists incensed by what they deemed an unwarranted attack on their cherished community leader. Jerry, usually neutral and ever watchful, stopped me on the street, amused but concerned. "You know she'll dig her heels in, right?" he whispered conspiratorially. I nodded, recognizing that Karen's counterattack was just around the corner. True to form, within a day, an official letter from the Homeowners Association appeared on my doorstep, ominous in its delivery. I regarded the thick envelope with trepidation before finally opening it. The language was aggressively formal, riddled with ominous legal jargon, accusing me of cultivating hazardous plants and breaching community safety protocols. It demanded an immediate appearance at a formal hearing, ominously named Review of Garden Safety and Community Standards. Feeling both agitated and slightly anxious, I understood Karen's revenge tactic, using HOA regulations to her advantage. After her embarrassing encounter with the peppers, she was doubling down, presenting herself as a hapless victim of my alleged horticultural negligence. The irony was palpable. My innocent tomatoes had been heartlessly pilfered by Karen, yet now I stood as the misguided villain in this suburban saga. Determined to retaliate, I meticulously prepared for the hearing, gathering evidence with precision. Armed with video footage showing Karen's tomato thefts and a rather amusing pepper incident, I felt confident that I could reveal her hypocrisy. I rehearsed my arguments diligently, firm in the belief that justice would prevail. Facts were on my side, weren't they? When the evening of the hearing arrived, I walked into the community center, cautiously optimistic, only to find tension thicker than bitter tea. Karen sat at a long table, wearing oversized dark sunglasses indoors, clearly still dramatizing her pepper woes, but undeniably playing the victim role to the hilt. Flanked by devoted HOA members, she eyed me with smug confidence. The meeting commenced, and Karen immediately launched into a theatrical testimony filled with magnified allegations. Her voice faltered dramatically as she painted the peppers as hazardous menaces disguised as tomatoes, claiming emotional trauma and physical distress. She paused for effect, dabbing at imaginary tears, ensuring the audience fully appreciated her ordeal. Suppressing the urge to roll my eyes, I patiently waited for my chance to speak. When finally invited to present my case, I stood and articulated my defense, describing my innocent hobby of tomato growing, repeatedly disrupted by Karen's petty thefts. I detailed the escalation and presented the video evidence, clearly showcasing Karen's covert criminal activities. As the footage played, murmurs swept through the room. Some neighbors gasped dramatically, while others stifled giggles at Karen's visible unease watching her own pepper debacle showcased on screen. Just as I anticipated victory, Karen interrupted dramatically, her voice rising sharply, accusing me of doctoring the footage to frame her unfairly. Her audacious claim stunned everyone, including me, turning the heated meeting into a chaotic shouting match. Soon, normally reserved neighbors began passionately taking sides, arguments arising across the community center, accusations flying back and forth amidst the turmoil. Our peaceful suburb suddenly evolved into a scene reminiscent of a theatrical courtroom drama. However, the revelation that truly caught us off guard was Karen's dramatic unveiling of an envelope from her oversized handbag. With the flair of a daytime television star, she announced that a horticultural expert's testimony declared my pepper plants not only hazardous, but possibly illegal under local agricultural regulations. The room was filled with gasps as Karen waved the envelope, demanding swift punitive action against me, while her supporters cheered, confident of her imminent triumph. My heart sank and panic took hold. This unexpected turn could mean serious legal trouble, shifting my originally harmless act of defiance into a genuine threat. How had Karen turned such a trivial issue into a legitimate concern for me? Confused and frustrated, I fumbled for a response, reeling under the weight of her assertions. Just as the situation appeared grim, an unexpected ally stepped forward. Margaret, the typically reserved HOA secretary, who hardly spoke at meetings, suddenly commanded everyone's attention. With serene assurance, Margaret revealed she had personally witnessed Karen repeatedly enter my garden uninvited and removing tomatoes weeks earlier. As Margaret recounted each incident with remarkable precision, her soft-spoken manner lent her words undeniable authenticity. Karen's face turned ashen as the narrative unfolded. Margaret's surprising interjection altered the room's dynamic, prompting previously silent neighbors to question Karen's integrity. Murmurs of disbelief at her deceit whispered through the crowd. Karen, caught off guard, attempted frantic damage control, accusing Margaret of conspiracy and betrayal. Margaret merely shook her head, her voice gentle yet firm, remarking, "Karen, everyone deserves tomatoes in peace." Her comment resonated deeply, eliciting laughter and nods of agreement throughout the room. Visibly shaken and humiliated, Karen struggled through her final remarks, trying to retain some semblance of dignity despite her evident defeat. The board, clearly rattled by the turn of events, declared they would review all evidence privately before making a decision. The meeting concluded amidst an air of tension, with neighbors leaving in quiet groups, whispering speculations about the repercussions for Karen's future. Heading home that evening, I felt oddly unsettled despite the apparent victory. Karen's machinations had inflicted significant damage on the neighborhood's trust, creating deep rifts and tensions unlikely to dissipate soon. My initial act of humor had spiraled into consequences far beyond my control. As I lay awake reflecting on the bizarre series of events, it became apparent that this gardening dispute had transcended mere tomatoes and peppers. It had turned into a battle for the heart of our community. Little did I anticipate that the most significant twist lay underground, waiting quietly beneath the soil of our ostensibly placid suburban gardens. The once serene community had morphed into a Cold War battlefield, with alliances forming, tensions simmering, and a silent rivalry brewing beneath every cordial greeting and forced smile. The fallout from the HOA meeting had exceeded my expectations. Karen had retreated momentarily, no doubt nursing her wounds and conceiving her next move, but the damage lingered, lines drawn, neighbors divided. A peculiar and unforeseen outcome was the neighborhood's newfound enthusiasm for gardening. Almost overnight, previously barren yards burst into life with vegetable patches, raised beds, and meticulously tended flower gardens. It seemed my clash with Karen had ignited a latent competitive spirit among homeowners, each aiming to showcase their gardening prowess. Jerry, who once barely managed his lawn, installed a full greenhouse, complete with irrigation and exotic plants. The Wilsons, once content with decorative plants, had ventured into tomato cultivation, their front yard neatly lined with labeled varieties. Even Margaret, our unexpected hero, had taken to growing chili peppers, proudly exhibiting them in her window boxes like a collection of miniature trophies. Karen, naturally, was less than pleased with this gardening renaissance. Though her presence had diminished since the HOA meeting, her influence persisted through a barrage of emails, complaints, and well-timed HOA violation notices. Unable to outright ban gardening, especially with half the neighborhood now participating, she resorted to every bureaucratic maneuver at her disposal to make my life difficult. One morning, I received a complaint about excessive plant growth encroaching upon public space, referencing my neatly contained tomato plants. Another notice cited improper waste disposal due to a single fallen leaf on the pavement. It was a slow, relentless campaign. In the trench of passive-aggressive warfare, Karen was scheming a clever strategy. No longer attempting to triumph publicly, her tactic now involved overwhelming me with technicalities, hoping my patience would run thin. But if Karen wanted a persistent skirmish, I was prepared to meet her challenge. My initial practical joke involving Carolina Reapers had run its course, so I needed freshly inventive measures. It had to be something Karen couldn't counter with her HOA regulations and technical grievances. Then, quite unexpectedly, inspiration hit me at the farmer's market. I was merely seeking fresh produce, my own garden rendered hazardous due to Karen's vigilant scrutiny. As I navigated through the bustling stalls, I chanced upon a conversation between two farmers about chili crossbreeding. One farmer casually mentioned a novel hybrid in development, an amalgamation of ghost pepper and Carolina Reaper, promising heat surpassing both progenitors. This ignited my imagination with a wild idea. What if I propelled this gardening saga to the extreme, crafting something so intensely hot it would stand as a definitive warning to Karen and anyone else challenging my garden? The subsequent days were spent immersed in thorough research. From gardening forums to endless crossbreeding video guides, I dived deep into the world of chili pepper hybrids. The process was intriguing, a harmonious blend of science and patience involving meticulous hand pollination with weeks of vigilant monitoring. Though not achievable overnight, the concept fueled my determination. It transcended mere dispute. It was about forging a legendary creation, a pepper fierce enough to etch its name in history. Sourcing the right seeds was straightforward. Carolina Reaper and ghost pepper seeds were readily available. However, cultivating them without Karen's interference necessitated a controlled setting. Then, along came Jerry with unexpected support. While inspecting my garden for further sabotage signs one afternoon, Jerry approached with unusual seriousness. "I know what Karen's up to," he declared bluntly, "and it's time we retaliated more forcefully." Curious, I raised an eyebrow, waiting for more. Jerry offered a solution. His old, mostly unused tool shed could serve as a mini greenhouse, a sanctuary for my potent pepper hybrid away from Karen's prying gaze. I was taken aback. Jerry typically played the role of an observer in our neighborhood dramas. Yet here he was, joining as an active participant, seemingly fed up with Karen's antics. We set to work immediately, transforming the shed into a greenhouse, installing grow lights and priming conditions for cultivation. The cloak of secrecy added an exhilarating layer to the endeavor, while Karen inundated me with HOA notifications. Little did she realize what was brewing just 2 houses away. Over the ensuing weeks, my hybrid peppers were nurtured with care. The seedlings took root, their innocuous leaves concealing immense potential. The pinnacle of it all? Karen was oblivious to what lay ahead, absorbed in regulating my visible garden while my covert operations flourished. Amidst this, the neighborhood thrived with newfound horticultural enthusiasm, heightening the irony of the situation. Karen's quest for gardening perfection inadvertently spawned a community of plant-loving rebels. As my pepper hybrids matured, the conflict expanded beyond Karen and me, instigating a spirit of independence within the neighborhood. Residents began challenging arbitrary rules, questioning the HOA, and supporting me in unforeseen manners. With the next HOA meeting looming, a dramatic confrontation was inevitable. This battle was no longer merely about my plants. It was a stand for every neighbor penalized for inconsequential infractions, a campaign for liberty against rigid conformity. I had been slapped with fine for leaving a rubbish bin out 5 minutes too long, and this had escalated into a much larger issue than I ever anticipated. Despite her cunning maneuvers, Karen was blissfully unaware of the storm approaching her. On the eve of the forthcoming Homeowners Association HOA meeting, I found myself standing in Jerry's shed, mesmerized by the hybrid peppers that had engulfed the space like a vivid battalion of defiance. Unlike any other peppers I'd nurtured, these small yet formidable plants bore intense hues of red and orange, glowing under the artificial light. Their innocent appearance belied their power. A mere nibble unleashed heat comparable to a volcanic eruption, rendering the notorious Carolina Reaper akin to a mere bell pepper. Cultivating such potency was exhilarating and mildly alarming. The pressing question was how to wield this newfound power. As I prudently selected a few of the finest peppers, my mind raced through myriad scenarios. Initially, the plan was straightforward: exact revenge on Karen for pilfering my tomatoes. Yet, things had unraveled far beyond that. Karen had converted this dispute into an all-out war, twisting HOA regulations into a labyrinth of fines and infractions aimed at dissolving my resistance. I found myself embroiled not merely in a battle for my garden, but in a crusade for every resident ever tormented by her absurd application of HOA rules. To triumph, I needed to craft a statement so emphatic, so irrefutable, that Karen would surely retreat. The next dawn welcomed me with a fresh HOA violation notice affixed aggressively to my front door. This latest accusation pressed charges of unauthorized agricultural activity within a residential zone. I chuckled briefly as I crushed the notice in my grip. Karen was faltering, bereft of genuine grievances. She now seemed to fabricate them at whim. Little did she know, I was poised to unveil something vastly more consequential today. En route to the community center for meeting, I observed nearly all residents moving in the same direction. While the previous meeting had been strained, this one bore a distinctly different atmosphere. People were not merely curious. They were prepared to take action. Conversations buzzed softly about Karen's recent exploits, alongside whispers of intrigue about my hybrid peppers, now woven into neighborhood lore. Even those who had maintained neutrality appeared to grasp the significance of tonight's proceedings. Inside, the air was thick with expectancy. Karen, perched at the front, dramatically donned her sunglasses, as if still reeling from her past pepper escapade. She sported her trademark pastel cardigan, yet her body language betrayed her unrest. Her facade of authority was slipping, and for someone like Karen, losing her grip on the community was more agonizing than any culinary inferno. The meeting commenced with obligatory formalities. HOA board members droned on regarding finances and community updates, but the true reason for gathering was clear to all. At last, Karen cleared her throat and embarked on her latest grievance, feigning concern as she spoke. "It has come to my attention," she declared, "that certain members of our community are engaging in perilous horticultural practices, endangering themselves and their neighbors. As responsible homeowners, it is our duty to maintain a safe environment and eliminate such reckless behavior." The room buzzed with mixed reactions, some supportive, others skeptical. I reclined in my chair, arms crossed, awaiting the inevitable. With a dramatic sigh, Karen addressed me as if scolding a rebellious pupil. "Mr. Thompson," she intoned, using my surname like a reprimanding teacher, "your insistence on cultivating excessively spicy, potentially hazardous crops is a grave concern. Just last week, an unsuspecting you fell victim to poisoning from your produce." I fought back laughter. The teenager in question had pilfered from my garden, receiving an apt lesson in respecting ownership. Karen's attempt to twist this into a criminal accusation against me was absurdly predictable. However, defending myself verbally wasn't necessary. I had orchestrated something far superior. Rising slowly and allowing tension to mount, I addressed Karen with calm determination. "Karen," I began, "if my gardening practices trouble you so, perhaps you'd care for a demonstration." From my bag, I retrieved a small plate, unveiling slices of my fiery hybrid peppers. The collective intake of breath from the room signaled recognition of these incendiary delights. Even those unfamiliar with the contents of the plate could tell it was no ordinary snack. Karen's face reflected a mix of skepticism and bravado. "And what's this supposed to demonstrate?" she questioned, her voice a notch higher. I responded with a smile. "Since you've taken such an interest in my garden, I thought you'd appreciate knowing what you're talking about. These are the peppers you've been concerned about. If you truly consider them dangerous, surely you wouldn't mind testing one yourself." The room fell silent as every gaze focused on Karen. She found herself in a bind, choosing between two unfavorable outcomes. Refusing might suggest weakness, but accepting meant stepping into my setup. For a moment, it appeared she might relent, yet she had meticulously cultivated a reputation for authority over the years. She wasn't about to let me undermine it in front of the neighborhood. With a steely smile, she reached for a slice and consumed it. The effect was immediate. Her face flushed crimson, nearly matching the peppers, her eyes widening in sheer shock as the heat surging through her mouth hit like a runaway train. A strangled gasp escaped her, fingers clutching the table for support as sweat beads appeared dramatically, her makeup wilting under the spicy onslaught. Her mouth gaped like a fish gasping for air, yet no words emerged. Only a choked sound as the fiery inferno raged inside her. The room, previously tense, erupted into laughter, applause rocking the walls as some wiped tears in her eyes while witnessing Karen's downfall. In her frantic search for relief, her hand reached for the water bottle, fumbling desperately with the cap, but the liquid failed to quell the flames. Jerry leaned over, his voice just loud enough to be heard. Looks like those aren't quite to her taste. Karen, her dignity now smoldering alongside her taste buds, stumbled to her feet and fled, leaving nothing but an abandoned chair and remnants of self-respect. The laughter carried on for minutes, neighbors high-fiving and shaking their heads incredulously at what had unfolded. As the meeting adjourned, the HOA board discreetly annulled all Karen's recent grievances against me due to a lack of substantiated evidence. Margaret, always a silent observer, simply winked my way as she gathered her papers. Thus, the battle concluded, not with legal maneuvers or documentation, but with the undeniable force of a single pepper. That evening, reclining in my garden's tranquility, I realized it transcended personal disputes. The neighborhood had evolved. Karen's former grip on everyone had dissipated, replaced by a spirit of boldness and autonomy. Gardening, of all pursuits, had ignited a transformation, and as I savored with my own tomatoes, finally at ease and free from theft concerns, a satisfied smile graced my lips.